The occupation has taken away so much from us. They've taken away time, they've taken away imagination, and we have to constantly fight to bring that back. And I think that's really one of the places, we need to fight for. We have the right to imagine a life of joy, freedom, liberation, and a liberated Palestine.
Marhaba everyone, welcome to Tarwida. I'm Afaf Shawabibi. Today I sit in conversation with a performance artist and storyteller who has carved a unique space for herself in the contemporary Arab performance landscape. Joining me from Amman is Sally Shalabi, also known as Shalabiya al-Hakawatiyya. Sally transforms folk tales, epics, and personal testimonies into live performances that engage both the collective past and the present moment. In addition to her live work, Sally is a writer, translator, and cultural researcher. We're recording this on the 24th of February 2026. And before we start, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel so you can get notified about new episodes. And don't forget to follow us on social media. We'll leave you the link in the description. Ahla sahla Sally. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, and Ramadan Kareem.
Ramadan Kareem. And we're lucky to have a storyteller with us. And there's no better way to start this episode than maybe a riddle or something that, just a story from you.
Sure. I'll tell you one of my favorite riddles from last year. So if anybody wants the answer, it's already online.
Okay.
And so this one, or if you want, I'll tell you the answer. You tell me at the end.
Okay.
أول زماني لولو أبيض وتاني زماني زمرد أخضر وتالت زماني ياقوت أحمر فسر يا أسمر وخد لك ذهب أصفر. Do you want the answer?
I know the answer. I think I know.
Try.
لما قلتي الألوان I thought of البطيخة بس بعدين you said أصفر فبعدين ضعت شوي.
It is something we eat. I'll give you a clue. It's about this big, and Jaffa is very famous for it.
طيب, so أبيض بعدين أصفر.
So I'll answer.
Okay,
you want to
yes,
try?
Please do. No, go ahead.
Okay. البرتقان. At first, its flower is white, and then the fruit is green. And then as it ripens, it reddens to a bright orange. فسر يا أسمر وخد ذهب أصفر is like the payment for it because it was like gold. It was gold back in the day.
Yeah.
Jaffa oranges were gold.
Yeah, it's a nice one. And, it really just shows that people will always want to hear a story. I mean, somebody can give a talk or a presentation and most of it might be forgotten, but they will remember a story if it's told
Absolutely.
in there. You've said that you view storytelling as maybe the mother of all art forms. What do you wish more people understood about storytelling? What are some of the stereotypes people have?
You hit it right on the head with that question. Well, what I would love for people to understand about storytelling, that it's not just about folk tales and it's everything that we do. In everything that I strive to do, I love to find that beautiful arc of the rising actions, the climax, and the resolution, how we all rest into things. The other thing about it is I do a lot of work, and I've been working for 20 years in storytelling, and I've been a professional since 2012. A lot of people still continue to hold on to the idea and this notion that because we work with traditional materials and oral heritage, that we should stay there and get stuck in an image and stuck in modes of transmission and modes of presentation that have to look like they did 100 years ago, 50 years ago, even 20 years ago. So many a time I'm asked to wear a tobe, or why am I not dressed traditionally? Why have I changed the story? Why am I not in a traditional setting? Like, this Orientalist view of what a storyteller is has continued to seep into how people view the art form today, and it's probably, I think, the biggest challenge because especially in Ramadan, here we are sitting talking about storytelling because everybody remembers storytellers in Ramadan. Throughout the rest of the year, it's not like that.
Yeah.
And so, how do we, challenge those things? What does it mean to be contemporary today? Why am I working with these materials? A lot of people think that there's something quaint and beautiful about it, which there is, but this is an over romanticization of the craft. And it is a craft that needs to be honed and practiced and improved upon and layered and utilizing everything around us. And this continuation of storytelling doesn't always utilize that. And the other stereotype, I think that's the biggest, especially, as a woman, is that I'm an educator and should be working with kids. Which
Right.
I love
Right.
kids, don't get me wrong. But my favorite form of storytelling is for adults. And there's something about a big, meaty story that you can go in and out of, that you can build on and work from is really beautiful. And if we really look at our materials, a lot of them are for adults. They're not for children, which is the irony of all of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. But let's talk about the beginnings of the Hakawati, the traditional role that the Hakawati played in the village life and in the cities in Palestine and Bilad al-Sham, which is what you focus on, so that people can understand the roots of this storytelling.
So historically, we've been oral communities throughout, and even to this day. And then, and in that, there are all these oral traditions that we transmit through storytelling, through poetry, through singing, through all these different forms, even as Zagharid. In storytelling, the public storytellers were always men up until the last 100 years. That started to shift with education, with women's entering the public life in a more predominant way. And their role was multifold. They were to gather people, they would transmit news, and they would entertain, and they would, community build in that way. And we have to also realize this was before radio, before television, before internet. So all of these things came in and shifted that. The women told privately in the homes. And if I was to look at the women's role, what I've discovered in my research and my work is there is this central woman called Al Badda'a in our communities, and in each community there's more than one. ودور البداعة, the role of the بداعة is to, be the keeper of all these stories, songs, sayings, zagharid, and because there's more than one, they complement each other. Sometimes they're in competition with each other. And they are the keepers of knowledge and wisdom and holders of community in that way. And so whether it's the men who are outside in the coffee shops or in the diwan or wherever they're sitting, or going around from village to village and town to town and place to place like a traveling bard, or being the woman inside, there is always that role. And a good badda'a and a good storyteller, hakawati, would be able to tell the right story at the right time. They would be so integral to their community and able to see what's going on, what's happening, and how they can use the right story to either bring people together or illustrate how to fix a problem or, be that person that brings people together. So they had those very important roles.
And so the men told stories in public, and they're about heroes and bravery, and the women in private was more about like wisdoms and learnings and whatnot. Are there ones that span different cultures and languages? Because as I understand, you've taken there are certain stories that are common in different countries.
So absolutely. So stories have a life of their own. We don't know, and a lot of our folktales, we don't know where they were birthed, who came up with them first. But different stories get traction in different places, are enjoyed more with different people. I tell a particular set, a particular repertoire. A different storyteller will tell a different repertoire. And the point, and the thing is, they grow and they live where the storyteller likes to have them grow and live. They're like plants. And so some of them have roots in our region, some of them come from other places. So, for example, Sindibad is actually from China.
Ah,
You know, even though it's ours and we love that story and everything, it's not
yeah.
ours. It's come into our lore from through travel and through exchange and all of that, and it's come and it's part of Alf Layla wa Layla, 1001 Nights, and so you see that, and then there are stories like I'm listening to a Welsh storyteller telling a story he wrote, and he's beautifully versed in folklore from his region and from the United Kingdom and from Wales. But I'm listening to the beginning of his story and I recognize one of the stories I tell from our region. You know, so the archetypes, the motifs, they travel and then they take on shapes and forms from the location and they become local in different ways. We have stuff that are like, so for example, Nus is very similar to Thumbelina. It's the half person, it's the small person, and you have other characters where you start to recognize the archetypes in different places, and that's really beautiful, I think.
And you've said that you love the ghul.
Oh, I love them.
What does the ghul mean for you? Like, why is it used?
So
who was the
So
ghul?
the ghul, if we look at real like mythology and folklore and legends and all of that, it's one of the levels of jinn in our lore. However, if we don't want to go down that road, and we can look at them in the story as these, for me, they're misunderstood monsters. And they're like people. Some of them are evil and some of them are good. But one of the things that I love about ghouls, and it's one of the beautiful wisdoms we have in our lore, is you hear the ghul saying after somebody says Salamu alaikum or Marhaba or just greets her, he or she, they will always answer with Lola salamak sabak kalamak lamarmasht lahmak qabla adamak. If it weren't for your greeting before your words, I would have eaten you meat and bones. And look at how beautiful that is. So you can approach this monster and get whatever you want from them, this magical being, and have them on your side. And there are different ways to approach them. And if you drink her milk, you become like her son or her daughter. If you eat her flour, if you eat from her food, you become close to her like her brothers. And so you have all this beauty that sharing food, being close to someone, being fed by them, all these things. And they are magical beings. They're shapeshifters. They can be good, they can be evil. I think there's something about that. I love fantasy, and there's something about, this magical creature that can do so much and can move and be force of good or force of evil. And it's just, yeah, I love them. I rarely like the heroes in my stories. I love these other like side characters a lot more. They're what enrich stories, I think.
Sometimes the heroes are boring,
I
feel.
absolutely agree.
They're too good, they're too proper, they're not interesting, certainly like to perform the villain or the monster is more fun for sure. Do you ever make up stories from scratch?
I do. So I did a project last year with an organization for children in Gaza, where we were looking at how we can, bolster their steadfastness, their sumud, and at the same time help root them in identity with everything that's happening and all the destruction around them. And we did some folk tales we selected some folk tales, but then also I ended up writing about 7 stories for that and performing them in audio for the project. And I really enjoyed them because they were research-based, but they were not lessons. They were not, they were proper stories. So we have stories that were about the fauna in Palestine, where we had 5 animals come together and say why each one is the strongest. And in the end, the sunbird says, "You're all strong. No one is stronger than the other. You're stronger in your unity." There was Layla al-Akkawiyya, who jumps off the wall in Akka and just all of that anticipation of a 10-year-old girl wanting to jump and learning to jump and learning to swim to do that. And we talk about Akka through that. There was a story that I love letter writing, so I had to include it in one of the stories. And so it's set in the 1930s between Al-Bassa and Gaza, and these two kids are exchanging letters. At first, they arrive by the sea, like messages in bottles, and this kid finds them, and he's like, he wants to write back. He wants to, he doesn't want to keep waiting for letters from the sea. And they exchange about their town, their villages and their towns and their places and their families. And so you learn about Palestine in the 30s through them. So things like that. And I've written more like historical fiction around Karima Aboud and Zahir Al-Umar as characters as personalities from our history as well. So writing stories about them. So that was a lot of fun.
You've said that getting a good story is not hard, but performing a good story is not easy. Tell us about the performance aspect of it. And I'm sure over the years, your style has evolved.
Absolutely. So in performance, I've learned to tone it down. I've also learned to work with the audience that you have in the space that you have. I work with my voice a lot. So a lot of people talk to me about that, like whether it's the cadence of the voice, or it's also including like a lot of the sounds, or making like these minute changes. So I've learned to utilize that. I do a lot of, and I also try to, throughout the years, every year kind of take a performance-based workshop that's outside of my discipline. So I've taken mime, I've taken dance, I've taken, theater work. And to me, that all comes into storytelling, because as the mother of arts, you kind of are the most multidisciplinary art. I have to be the sound, the film, the image, the all of it. And because storytellers typically don't work with directors or producers or whatnot. We're the director, the producer, the performer. So it's really hard. So you have to constantly have this external eye working with you as well. Sometimes it's by asking people to attend rehearsals and whatnot. So I would say my style has matured, has calmed down, and it's one where I like to invite people into the story and really let their imaginations do the work. I think that's really beautiful if we can do that.
And when you don't have an audience to, feed off from, their energy, how is it when you're recording online, like for video? How is that for you, performing?
I'm going to tell you what happened during Corona. So during COVID, I got a call, like we locked down in Jordan quite quickly and intensely. And I think we locked down on a Monday. And by Wednesday, I was online because I got calls the next day. Our kids are climbing the walls. What do we do? Because I have like this kid, I have this community around me. And so the community reached out and I went online. And it was really hard because we were so isolated at the time, and the only way I had to communicate with people was the camera. And the camera suddenly became the faces of all the people that were in the audience before. And it was not hard to imagine. So I would imagine, because people would then, whether during the live stream or during the recording, they would say, hey, hello, we watched this. And so I would start to imagine them in my mind's eye and kind of see them there. If we were live and they said something, I'd reach out to them. And it was really funny. The kids thought I could see them. Yeah. Because I was saying their names. And for me, that imagination that the camera is not a camera, that the camera is a person, that the camera has people behind it, to me, that's what makes a difference. It's what also makes you real on camera. It's when I have to be photographed that I find it really awkward.
So, Sally, you were the first woman to publicly reclaim and perform Sirat al-Tahir Bebers, which is actually a very male-dominated bioepic, and you revived it for modern audiences. And how was that for you? How do you take a traditional story, make it relevant? What can change? What must remain untouched?
It's an excellent question. I've been working with Sire since 2017. So it's been 9 years now. Oh my God, 9 years. And when I first encountered it in 2016, I was very dismissive of the work. And like you said, it was a story of a man told by men to men of male heroics. But we did a mujawara in 2017, and I was going there to be with Dr. Fayha Abdel Hadi to look at oral history work that she had done and how we transformed that into performances. But they had merged the two together, and I love magic and fantasy and good lore, and there was something just so captivating about Asire. There was something that was just, drawing me into it. The text was written in Ottoman Arabic. It's about 200 years old. So it was peppered also with a lot of Turkish, peppered with a lot of different words that we don't use today. And it was difficult text. And like I've omitted a whole character. I just didn't like how this character was presented. He was a simpleton, following Bapers around in Cairo. And as I deepened with the story, I learned that he isn't a simpleton. He is Mubarak, and he sees things. He presents himself in that way. So I cannot omit him. So I've brought him back. But I talk about him with a little bit more respect than how the storyteller in the past would present him. He was such a caricature, and that's what really agitated me, But he would say these things of wisdom, and he would see things that Bapers couldn't see. He would take him out of harm's way without Bapers knowing. And suddenly the simpleton became this really integral character. And we also have another example is the women characters in the epic. They're quite flat. And so for me, the idea that I want to bring these women to life. I can't, add so much more, but I can give them, height and width and depth and names and bring them, forward in a way that this misogynistic text, which it is, doesn't do, which I won't allow. So there's also the way they treat the women sometimes is quite misogynistic. And of the days past, they were appropriate for days past. They are no longer appropriate for today. So I work with the text in that way, and I build those in and I bring it back in. So those are some of the changes I make to the text.
Have some people reacted that, no, this is not how the story is, or is there pushback on that?
None whatsoever. People don't know the original story. The people who have read the story enjoy my retellings, so it's totally fine. I think,
okay,
there are only 5 of us in the world today who have read the whole text. Who know
how did you know
story. That? From the researchers.
Wow.
The people who worked on it and myself. There are people who have the text that have read parts of it, but they don't know it as a full-bodied, living creature. So, yeah, I have a lot of license. And I want to tell you something. Here's something that, we tell people all the time. I have the license of the storyteller. I can embellish, I can change, I can, salt and pepper. And some researchers like Dr. Sharif Kana'ane, who is the father of Palestinian folklore, so to speak, I remember walking, we had lunch at his house, and he holds me arm in arm, and we were walking to the door, in the gate, and he's in his 80s, so he's walking slowly. He's a bit hard of hearing. And he goes, Sally, you need to tell people you changed the stories. And I look at him and I tell him, but Doctor, everybody knows I changed the stories. and to me that is a little bit about that friction between academia and conserving and maintaining our traditions versus, being an artist and being a contemporary artist. And what does it mean to work with these historical works, these artifacts that we're bringing alive, and dusting them off and making them palatable to people who will not have accessed them, who look at them as something from a day gone by. So for me,
Yeah.
that tension is really important
Yeah.
in how we work with it, and probably, this is what differentiates a storyteller from another. How they work with these materials, what they do with them, and are they satisfied with just being relics of the past and mouthpieces of the past? And I say this with all honor, with all respect, of course. Or do they want to be, avant-garde and contemporary and play with them and change them? And for me, changing them is not about inserting a mobile phone in a character's hands, or all of that, but really making them reflect the values and the morals of today and what we see in society today, because that really is a big part of what we do. We're a mirror of society, even in these
Yeah.
stories. That's what they were, these stories.
And another thing that you've done to make traditional things from our culture more accessible to the audiences, it has to do with the Zagharid and the Mhaha. So first, before we get into that, can you explain to the audience what they are?
Sure. So we have this tradition where we have a three-part call. The first part is we call it Lafz Nida, just a hey, yeah, or hey, like a hey, you. And then we have 4 verses from poetry. And the third part is the ululation. Together, the 3 parts are called Zaghrude or called Mhaha. And this is a very ritualistic call, a very ritualistic, oral tradition that is done around celebrations mostly.
What was it originally, though? It wasn't celebrations, right?
Oh, no, it wasn't. It was a war cry. So this is pre-Islamic history. And so when we look at it, it's actually has roots in men and women standing at the battlefield and calling out to the the warriors, the fighters, with this cry, with 4 lines of poetry that encourage them to fight, encourage them to bravery, encourage them to defending honor. And is actually a war cry that has come to us from Africa. And so the call at the beginning is Arab, and the poetry is Arabic, and then we have that last part. And for over the centuries, it has migrated from the Arabian Peninsula, where it was done, where it originated, to Bilad al-Sham, where we are now, and it has transformed in that migration from a war cry to a celebratory cry. And the badda'a, the woman who knows this, sometimes we have in Arabic the words yartajal to mean improvise, but البداعة تبتدع من البدعة, من الإشي الجميل, from something that is really beautiful. So she comes up, she also improvises, but the root of the word is so, there's something just so much more beautiful about it than irtijal, which also has the word rajul in it. So here my feminist leanings come in, and I prefer the word badda'a. Yeah, and a lot of the Zagharid we have today were produced by women who didn't read and write, but they were such poetresses that they were able to look at what was around them and come up with these 4 lines of poetry, these verses, and make them a celebratory piece of joy. So there's something just really beautiful about it. And my research was looking at why have we lost these women, why aren't we transmitting these Zagharid? And where are the women? Where have they gone? What has happened? And so, by the way, the research is available to download. It's available to everyone on my website, and the links to the podcast. If anybody wants to hear them, it's all in Arabic, though.
So I'd love for our audience to hear an example of a Mhaha with
Sure.
Zaghrud.
ويها باب دارنا رمانة، ويها حلوة ولفانة، ويها حلفت ما أقطع عنها، ويها تيرجع حبيبنا بالسلامة. And that
So what does this mean?
Yeah, that means In front of our home is a beautiful pomegranate tree. It's beautiful, it's ripe, it's lovely. And I have promised not to cross by it until my love comes back to me.
Oh, that's
Lulululi.
beautiful.
It
That's beautiful.
is.
And so, one of the things that I heard on your Zagharid podcast was how you took one of these mahas and you made a song called the Azzak song with electronic music.
يا بنت هالبنا آويها والكحل بعينيكي رقص وغنى آويها حطوا القدم على القدم آويها وإحنا أخدنا وخلي الغير يستنى وخلي الغير يستنى آويها وجهك مدور نزل القمر باسه آويها ولو خربت الشام عزك ما حدا داسه آويها وحياة رب السما والجوخ اللي لبسه آويها واللي بياخد بنات الناس بحطهم على راسه.
What was your goal in doing this?
So, as I said, the research was to try and figure out why we aren't learning Zagharid, why they aren't being transmitted, what's happening to the women. And for me as an artist, my role is to experiment. And my experimentation with music and what if we change what we hear or how we hear it? Will a younger generation learn? If they're not hearing the hajj voice doing the awiha and the zagharid, it's not in that cadence, it's not in that rhythm, it's in a completely different
Yeah.
Will they memorize it, the words now, and will they, when need to, have them around them? I actually played it for a lot of different people, and when I was talking about the research and the book, and what was interesting was some people, mostly in the West Bank, were like, "You can't do this. You've ruined our oral traditions this way. You've desecrated them." And then when I played it to some people in 48, they were just loved it. They celebrated it. And to both of them, I said, "Thank you," because my role is to put this out there. As an artist, as a contemporary artist, I have to experiment and I have to find ways to keep what I love alive in different ways. But whether you like it or not, whether you want it or not, that is your role as an audience. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it dies. And it tells me I need to experiment some more.
Yeah, yeah. And so you've said that you, at a certain point, you felt that you not that you maximized, but you were ready to move on to other forms of storytelling. And that's when you began to focus on oral histories. And among your notable performance works is Khair Ya Tair, that tells the story of the Palestinian Nakba through oral testimonies and inherited memory. And then you continued, since the genocide, you began focusing on oral histories of people under occupation, which is the performance series you mentioned before. And I saw in Arabic it's...
وأنا شفت.
وأنا شفت, which merges history and personal narratives with music.
بعد كم يوم من رجعته وبنص الليل حوط جيش الاحتلال البيت. نزل أبوي يشوف شو القصة وطلع له الكابتن كلود المسؤول عن بيت لحم. بيقول له بده نبيل. أبو نبيل بيسأله الجيش ليه بدهم إياه؟ ليه بدهم ابنه؟ أنت ما بتعرف شي، ابنك فتح. وبيكون نزل نبيل وبيطلع عليه وأبوه بيسأله يابا في شي؟ نبيل بيهز براسه.
So in 2023, in February, I was in Palestine collecting stories for Al-Hara Theater in Beit Jala, and they were wanting these personal narratives to build theater performances for the site-specific festival. And they also wanted some storytelling stories. So I did the research. I met all these people, these beautiful storytellers, and I then had to write them in both Arabic and English and, send them to theater makers and to use them as source material. And when the genocide started, all production stopped. I mean, the festival happened in 2023 in late summer, and I found myself after the genocide just completely unable to work, trying to understand as well what was happening around me as an artist and as a person, as a Palestinian, first and foremost. And I actually didn't produce any kind of work for about a year. And in listening to my community here in Jordan, the Palestinians and the Jordanians, like watching this eradication of our people in front of our eyes, I felt we needed to hear and see something else.
Yeah.
We needed to support each other in a way where we saw our steadfastness, our resilience, our ability to withstand and resist occupation. And I took this source material and I presented different, like, so each show would present 2 stories of Palestinian resistance and steadfastness. Some of these stories were of, I did 9 stories in a 5-part, so it's a 5-part series, and I do 9 stories in them. And each story illustrates a different part of Palestinian life, so they're not really repetitive. So we only have one Nakba story, and it's a very particular story, actually 2. One is from Jerusalem, where you actually hear about the ethnic cleansing of the western part of Jerusalem, which we don't hear. And Faiza was 10 years old when this happened, and she remembers being, forcibly evicted from her home, put, blindfolded, put in a truck, driven around the city, only to find out at the end of the night they were 2 streets away from their home and they could never go back. So that's a story we don't always hear. Carlos Berham, who we start the series with, is in his 70s, and he walks every day to the Makhrour. I don't know if he still does. I've been told he still does, because Al Makhrour is part of the lands that were confiscated and, illegally taken by Israel in the last land grab. But he would walk there every day, and I actually met him on his land. And it was really beautiful. And he talks about the love of the land. And it's a very beautiful, poetic, nostalgic piece. So we start there as well. We have Ferial Abu Haykal, this woman who's known as Fatat al Khalil. She would write under that pen name in the newspapers. And she grew up, and she was born in 47. So she grew up, in Al Khalil, and then saw it under occupation in 67. So we hear about 67 through her eyes as Khalil fell and these white flags are put up. And so you constantly have this strength from these incredibly beautiful people and all these different stories. And I felt that this is what we needed to hear. Yes, we were being killed, and yes, we're being, decimated, and we're told our bodies mean nothing, but look, we've done this before, we've withstood, and we've withstood with humor, with grace, with humility, with ingenuity, with education, with so much, and that's what that series was about. I burned out from it though.
I'm sure it's very draining. I mean, so this is a way to, preserve the collective memory. But how does it differ from other forms of history, let's say, or, the written form, let's say?
So we always say, history is written by the victors. And even our Palestinian history is the official narrative. Who writes that official narrative? Who tells it? And who tells Faiza, who saw her father at Bawabat Mendelbaum, the gateway, and didn't recognize him? Who tells Amna and how she got a divorce from her husband and carried her family through and still carries her family through only to have her son martyred? Who tells, Peter Qumri, who was a doctor who would help, kids who were shot during the Intifada, but really at the same time was such a Ba'athist that he could ask Saddam Hussein for 20 million. Who tells these stories?
Yeah.
You know? we have to. These stories are in the homes of every one of us. They're the stories of our mothers, our fathers, our uncles, our brothers, our brethren, our cousins, people around us. And because the political narrative or the official narrative is out there told from so many different perspectives, and it makes it come alive completely differently. It's not about dates and numbers and just that. It just viscerally comes alive. And I think that's what's really important to me. What I do is, and this is why it's called And I Saw, is I bear witness to what they bore witness to. And so we're constantly bearing witness to their time, and we're bearing witness to our time. And so within the stories, I always say, and I saw. And I think that's one of the important roles for us, as the genocide still continues to this day, that how do we bear witness? It's not about explaining who we are, or it's not about, giving the West a lesson. I think my role as a storyteller is to hold those stories and bear witness for myself and for others in my community first and foremost. And in that, I preserve my grandmother's memory, my mother's memories, and my people's memories in ways that, like, my grandmother witnessed the Nakba. My mother was in Tulkarem when the Israelis came in 1967, and how she fled and all of that. So I honor them by honoring all these stories.
Yes, definitely. And so when you were describing, the difference between the official written historical narrative, who's the one who writes it, versus these oral personal stories that can be collected to really understand in detail what's happening. I mean, it's the same as, mainstream news, mainstream media versus all the social media accounts of
Absolutely.
What's happening in the genocide. And it made me think of, Bisan, who's a Hakawati, actually, before the genocide. She was a teller of stories, a Hakawati, and who became essentially a journalist. I mean, people turned to her to really see what's going on in the ground.
إلى كل متابعين القصص والحكايات في كل بقاع الأرض، معكم حكواتية ومعنا حكاية جديدة.
And you've also said that storytelling is a tool for liberation. So if we want to take it a step further, what about storytelling will allow us to liberate ourselves?
So I always say storytelling is about imagination. And if we don't have imagination, we can never imagine our liberation. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things we need to look at. I was just in Palestine at the end of last year, and I was doing workshops with kids around stories and storytelling and memory and imagination. And what really, tore at me was, we're really good at looking back and using our memories and remembering, but imagining a new future is really difficult for us. And I think that storytelling as a tool for liberation means we have to activate our imagination as a practice so that we can have build an imagination, build a new awareness of what it looks like to be liberated instead of being stuck in the past. And I think that's, and that's where I sit today, where my research sits today. How do we activate imagination? How does imagination become a daily practice for us? Working with these kids, we worked on stories. This was in Jenin and Tulkarem, mostly working with displaced children. And, in one, they were given a task to imagine a liberatory act, without those words, of course, for themselves and set in the future. And the idea was, can you imagine writing a story to someone else in 500 years? And both groups of kids were stuck. They could only reflect their current situation or the past. They couldn't imagine a liberated Palestine. And to me, that was so heartbreaking. That was so frustrating. And of course, you don't say that to the kids. You encourage them and you prod and you push. But the occupation has taken away so much from us. They've taken away time. They've taken away imagination. And we have to constantly fight to bring that back. And I think that's really one of the places, we need to fight for. We have the right to imagine a life of joy, freedom, liberation, and a liberated Palestine. And if we are constantly producing materials from the past and historic works, which are important, I'm not saying they're not, but where are the people working on the future?
Yeah. So how can our listeners support Hakawatis like you, or the events like Mahrajan al-Hikaya, or other events? Are they well attended? Are people interested?
That's such a great question. So sometimes they're really well attended and sometimes they're not. I think the best way to support us as storytellers is come to the performances. And if you don't like them, tell us, critique us so that we can get better. I think the important thing is, and part of what I view as a liberatory approach to the arts, is that we need to pay the artist. And what I mean by that is for me to stay independent. So and part of, and what I'm saying is that, like, and I saw, and Shufet was purely independent. There were no logos on that show. There were no sponsors. Nobody paid us except the people who came. And they paid us, they supported us by, buying the tickets. And I know every single person that came into my audiences, and I really appreciate them. And I send them out a lot of love and support, because what they did by buying that ticket was allowed me to stay independent and stay true to my voice and tell what I want. I wasn't, being produced by anyone. I wasn't getting money from an NGO or a Western cultural organization or being told what to say or how to say it. So I think something needs to shift. And we're at a very, we're at a crossroads right now with funding and all of that. It's like we're rejecting a lot of funding. We're being censored by a lot of organizations as Palestinians. And we really have to turn to the audiences to help us continue. But if we're always telling the stories that are funded, when do we tell our own story? And so I think that's how the audience can really support us, so that the next generation can continue to do independent work. We have to start now. I won't see the switch in my lifetime. I know this. But I hope that the younger generation benefits from the fruits of our resistance and our stance today and our political perspectives, because there isn't an artist that isn't political. That doesn't exist. And if they tell you they're not political, they're not paying attention. They're just not paying attention.
Yeah, definitely. This is a common thread with artists, this issue. So just so that we can, round off on a sort of more creative note, can you leave us with maybe a riddle or something that, just have a nice ending to this?
I'll leave you with one that I won't answer. افتني يا فارس، افتني يا فارس بشي شفته جالس بيقضي حقوق الناس بس عمره ما دخل مدارس. This one was also from last year. The answers are online. I'll leave you there. Think about it.
Okay. طيب Sally, thank you so much. يعني شلبية الحكواتية, we could go on for much longer. بس يعني I encourage all our listeners to check out your social media channels, Instagram, YouTube, to see the great work and the rich work that you do. It's been a pleasure having you. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much. And you guys keep doing what you do. Thank you, Tarwida.